believe that, but I mean, it's more likely that something like that kind of a God would exist. But as far as the capital G God, I think there's insufficient reason to believe that it's true, and I think there's good reasons to look at the world and believe that it seems like the world that we live in is not the creation of that kind of a being. And if it were, we're in the dark about a lot of things. So the reasons why I would answer in the negative to the question, does God exist, is because of the failures of the arguments that are in support of the God, and from inconsistencies in the world. Maybe like the existence of suffering, the existence of evil. It's sometimes called the problem of evil. I think that's evidence that supports the view that there isn't a God, although it's not conclusive. There's definitely answers that a religious person can give. And then there's also maybe reasons from the success of science and the success of a naturalistic picture of the world. Science takes a methodological approach where they assume that there are natural causes to things, and that assumption and that process of deriving knowledge has been really, really successful. So I think that is another point in favor of naturalism and of atheism, although there still could be a God that exists out there beyond the universe that just doesn't interact. But then at that point, you're talking about a non-falsifiable God. So a kind of a God hypothesis that there's no evidence that could disconfirm it. So there's no evidence that can confirm it or disconfirm it. And then at that point, there's no reason to believe that it exists. So, I mean, we can just kind of set it aside. There's nothing really we can do with that, rationally speaking. So, I know a lot of people believe in God for personal reasons, for experiences they've had or things they've been taught growing up. But what I'm mainly interested in is the rational justification that you can provide for a belief, for a theistic belief. So, I agree that people have religious experiences and they think to themselves that what they experience is veridical and it corresponds with this real God that exists. But that's not enough to convince someone who hasn't had that experience that there is such a being. So I'm interested in other arguments, like arguments from the origins of the universe maybe, or from the way life exists, the complexity of life, or maybe from the existence of morality or something like that. And maybe we'll get into that here soon. Vocab will decide which of the arguments he wants to discuss. But as far as I see it, I'm provisionally an atheist. So for the moment, I'm not convinced, but I still like to think of myself as being open-minded and looking for answers. And we all change our minds throughout our lives. So who knows? Maybe someday I'll become a theist. But for the time being, I'm skeptical of the existence of God.
Wait, but how much evidence would you need? Like, exactly what kind of evidence do you need to convince you that there is
That's a
God?
good question. Yeah.
Or
Well, I'd make a distinction between believing that God exists and believing in God. So this is something Frank Turek says a lot. That believing that God exists is just to affirm the proposition that, yeah, there is a God. Like saying that some collection of evidence or some argument is sound and it justifies the conclusion. Maybe not to a certainty, but maybe beyond a reasonable doubt, or just a justified conclusion. And that's different from believing in God, right? So to believe in God is like to worship God and to be, to submit yourself to the will of God or something like that. So I could believe that God exists and affirm just the proposition that God exists and be convinced by some argument and evidence. But I think this is also consistent with Christian theology. I think in John 6:14 it says that Jesus says nobody can come to me unless the Father draws him near, or something like that.
Yeah, in John 6 it says no one will come to me unless they're drawn by the Father.
Right, so God has to, like the act of the Holy Spirit has to draw the person in order for them to believe in God. Right, but I could be convinced just by the arguments and the evidence that that God exists. Right, so I can. You get what I'm saying?
So all you need is an actual sound argument that God exists.
Yeah. Or a personal experience would probably do it too.
What kind of personal experience?
Maybe just one of those religious, ineffable, just an experience that religious people talk about, where they just have this overwhelming sense of the presence of God, and they're just, that alone convinces them. I think that would be a piece of evidence that I could use to think about the existence of God. It might not be conclusive, right? I'd have to.
It could also be something that you can't explain, and that's why.
Right. So that's a problem. Yeah, that is a problem. Like, how would I know that it's? That's one of the reasons I'm skeptical of people who say they have these religious experiences. How do you distinguish between a psychological experience that you have that's all in your head, and then actually some being that is invisible out there communicating with you? It's hard. It seems like it's really hard to distinguish between the two. So that answers your question. Yeah.
So if, my name is Lori, I work here at the college. So if you said that it might take your own supernatural experience to actually believe the existence of God, why would you not take into account other people's experiences? And the thing is that it's not all just religious people that have experienced me. I don't consider myself to be religious at all. I mean, I just don't consider myself to be religious, but I'm very spirit-minded, spirit-filled, and I believe in God. I mean, I serve, I worship Him, I pray to Him every day. But if you have somebody who's close to you and had this supernatural experience, and they said, I can't explain it, Spencer, oh my gosh, would you not? I mean, you're just saying it's going to take your own supernatural experience, but what if that supernatural experience happened with somebody that's a very big part of your life? I mean, how would you handle that kind of information coming from someone that's close to you and who knows what your beliefs are?
Right. Well, I don't think the fact that a person would be close to you would change the strength of their argument, or the strength of their evidence. It could be someone I've never met before, and them claiming to have an experience would be equally as a piece of evidence to look at. But the problem with one person having a religious experience is you attribute it to the God of Christianity, or to Jesus, or to the Holy Spirit within, I'm assuming. But what if I talk to other missionaries on ASU campus. I talk to Mormons who say they have this burning in the bosom, and they attribute it to what Joseph Smith has written in his book, or whatever. So a Hindu can have a religious experience, a Buddhist can have one. People back in ancient Roman times had their own experiences with other deities.
That's
right. So the problem with the appeal to religious experience is that there's this huge diversity of different causes of those experiences. So apart from me having one, I mean, the point about me having one was that would be another piece of evidence that would inch me closer to theism. Right? It would push me away from thinking that atheism is true. But there's still something that needs to be explained about why there's so much diversity of other people believing. So from my point of view right now, I think that there's a naturalistic explanation for people having supernatural experiences, and it's psychological, and it can actually be explained in the big picture, in terms of our evolutionary history. That because of the way our minds evolved as a species, there's certain byproducts that come along with it, and some of them are attributing agency to inanimate things and to over-interpreting intentions of certain physical things. Like ancient people used to think that there was minds in the trees and the flowers and the wind and the sun and the moon and everything like that. And it's an over-interpretation, it's an over-attribution of agency to things in the world. And the modern version of that is just attributing it to one transcendent Father in the sky, or beyond the universe. And so there's a way also to explain like these mystical experiences. There are studies that have been done at UC Berkeley, I think, and MIT. They have something called a God helmet, where you can put on this device on your head, and there's magnetic things lined up on either side, and they can send electromagnetic pulses through it, and they can stimulate the presence of somebody in the room with you. So you can go.
Bro, I got one right here. That's what I was going to try on you today.
Really?
That's how I'm going to win.
So, I mean, we can artificially simulate the feeling of the presence of an agent in the world just by physically stimulating your brain, right? So it seems to me that there are perfectly viable explanations for why all these different people have all these different types of religious experiences, and they attribute them to things, external to their minds and the supernatural forces in the world. But from a scientific point of view, that's all explainable, right? So you would have to somehow overcome that. All these other people, their experiences you can explain scientifically in terms of chemicals and serotonin and different chemicals that are happening in your brain. But then your experience, yours was one that was real. Yours really came from this transcendent spirit that exists beyond the universe, and that just seems really, really far-fetched to me. So what I'm looking for is like evidence and argument that makes it more probable than not that a capital G God exists. And so far, I'm not convinced that that's the case.
Good question. Wants us to go do some stuff?
Let's try this God helmet.
Do some God stuff? All right. Hey, man, thanks for bringing us out, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. All right.
Never get any credit.
I know. Give a guy. Someone needs to bring you an apple or a cookie next time. All right. Yeah, my name is Vocab. I think you kind of introduced us, but I've known Spencer a while because I used to go down to Mill Avenue and try to tell people about why they should take a second look at Jesus. And during that time, atheism was kind of becoming popular on the campus. Richard Dawkins' book had just come out, The God Delusion, stuff like that. Now this is, how many years ago did that come out? But so during that time, a lot of the conversations I would have people down there in the ASU area would result in debates and discussions like that. And then I would go back and look into it and all that. And so that led me to eventually a friendship with him and some of his friends. We've been, I think, friendly debate partners for a number of years now. And it's good. I'm glad to do it. And hopefully you guys can think some new thoughts before you leave today. So, Spencer said a lot of interesting things about why he does not believe in God. And I'm going to do something that will probably not, I don't think you guys will like it, but maybe some of you guys will like it better, which is, let's just say he was right about everything he said. So I'm taking it to a different level, okay? So they won't like it for sure. But is it something that is even appealing to you? Would you want to believe sort of this universe, where if you notice he kept on referencing science and testing certain things with that, and there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself, but it ends up with, here you are on this rock, in this space, and there's nothing outside of that. And you have to think about what that means for your existence. You have to think about what that means for all of reality, all of existence. You have to think about what that means about what you think your purpose is in life. You have to think about what that means about everything. Because what we're talking about is not really merely academic, like, oh, this nerd believes that and this nerd believes that. It's about, it affects your life. It affects how you live. It affects what you think about yourself, how you view others. And you want your ideas of origins and what you believe about reality to hopefully line up with what you do in your life. Meaning, you believe this and an action in your life is matched to it and it's consistent. And the question is not just what is desirable and what is sort of appealing to what you intuitively know, feel, and think about yourself, but also which one do you think you can live consistently with? How do people live? Because I would have a basic charge that it's more difficult for a person to live and function and live completely consistent on any given atheistic framework than, well, maybe a lot of atheists say it is. Meaning, we're talking about this in the car, and so I don't think you guys would like this either. But when it comes to questions of morality, for example, I think you can say, we look over here, we have a clear source of morality, we have a reason why we should hold to these moral views, and there's even what you might call consequences for not doing so, but there's a whole system. And then when you go over here on any given atheistic system and you say, now let's talk about questions of morality. That's not to make small questions of morality, but it is to because what I mean by that is questions of morality can sometimes be tricky and thorny. I think we should recognize that. But going over into an atheistic worldview and saying, okay, here's the essence of the universe, here's what it is, here's what you are. Now, let's start answering some moral questions. I think Spencer's answers to a lot of questions about morality are much more moral than his atheism gives him. Now, he's not going to agree. Like I said, I don't think these guys will like what I'm saying. But ask yourself if it is the case that you were not placed here with any intention, but you just find yourself here and you say, what am I? How would you describe yourself on an atheistic worldview? You have to think about yourself primarily, maybe not only, and you can try to flesh that out if you want, primarily in physical terms, I think. So, a conglomeration of cells who, when coordinated together, function towards this end, and that's why you're a breathing organism. But can you say a whole lot more? Can you say what you should do? So a should is like an ought. Like you ought not to kill your brother. Can you say that an atheist? Now you can say all kinds of things. You can say, well, I'm an atheist, but I still wouldn't kill someone. Obviously, we understand that. And we talk about this in the car. I understand. But the question is there an ought? Like you should not do this. And furthermore, I think it's valuable to add this input. Not only should you not do it, but there are actual consequences besides just being put in jail. If you kill 30 people, can you really be punished sufficiently in this life? You cannot. Of course. There's no way. You don't have 30 lives to give. You can't. You just, there's no real justice in that system. And so I think it's important when we talk about these big questions out here to say, what would that mean if it was true for the way I would live and for what it would mean about myself? So it's not just that, okay, he doesn't find Christian arguments appealing. Okay, I understand that. But it's also, there's questions that then say, okay, if you hold to a version of this, some version of atheism, and that's how you see the world, can you really, what does it mean to live like that? What does it mean to look like that? And you have to ask yourself, is it consistent with what you do, with what you say you believe in? I don't think you really can, because I don't think it's a livable system. I don't think what's said over here matches with what you're supposed to do in life, especially on questions of morality. That's the big one.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Further this along. So, is truth determined?
Oh, wait. Periscope question. Atheists do have morals and can live their lives the same as others that subscribe to a religion. They're on your side, bro. Sorry. I was hoping you out. Go ahead.
All right. I wanted to ask you, is truth determined by what makes you feel good or gives you a fulfilling life or satisfies your soul?
No, but I actually do think it's relevant to that question.
So let's say we discover something about the world that isn't exactly satisfying. Are we going to say, oh, it's not true, it's false because I don't like it?
No.
That's a fallacy.
That's what atheists do with God. Just kidding, I'm just playing.
No, you know what I'm saying, though.
No, that's not the way. We don't determine truth on our preferences.
Right.
To answer seriously, no,
so,
we do not.
So atheism could be, it could be true that no God exists, and a lot of people don't like that, but that doesn't change the facts of the world, right?
I think more people would like it than don't, though.
Right, maybe, would like what?
God not existing.
Well, I
think that's the preferred way to go.
Maybe. I know lots of atheists who say they wish that God would exist. They're just not convinced that it's true. They'd like to live forever. They'd like to have justice in the end. They'd like all those things. They're just not convinced that it's actually true. It's kind of like a fantasy.
And they don't get to be in charge no more.
Well, maybe some people have a motivation not to. But so that was just my first question. All right, so truth isn't determined by what makes you feel good.
Yes.
Okay. And the next is, you said that atheists don't really, like when they say, don't kill your brother, you shouldn't, commit murder. If a God doesn't exist, why is it exactly that there is, like, what is the atheist missing in terms of an obligation? Is it like a philosophical ultimate reason why they ought to do something, or what's I don't get what the problem is.
Well, there's no ultimate authority in your structure, so you don't have any ultimate resources. So I have an ultimate authority. I can say the creator, the sovereign, the one in charge, he says this. Now, he always has rational reasons for what he says, though. That's the beautiful
But the same thing can happen in atheism.
You don't have that.
Well,
what's your ultimate authority then?
The moral reasoning, the question of, should we kill or should we murder or should we not murder? We're doing moral reasoning, and the ultimate authority is the objective reasons to do something or to refrain from doing something. right? So on your worldview, you still have to engage in more reasoning and say, like, well,
Yes.
so who was the one that decided that God was the good one and that Satan was the bad one, from your point of view?
No one had to decide that. It's
You're making that assumption going into it. Then I can say the same thing. Like, doing bad actions is like self-evidently bad, and doing good things is self-evidently good.
Yeah,
it's like we're in the same spot here.
No, because you don't have any way to define good and bad upon your worldview. I do.
What do you mean I don't?
Real quick, I'll show you
that
how.
out. What do you mean I don't?
I can
do.
define it in accordance with God's nature, which is inherently good. You don't have any standard. So when you say G-O-O-D,
what do you mean I don't have a... I don't...
Tell me where you're standing. So if you say this is better than this. So here's two moral actions, right? And you point to this one, and you make a moral decision. You say, Vocab, this decision is better than this decision.
Right.
You had to do that from some kind of framework, meaning
So
you had like a rubric.
Right.
Where did you get your rubric from?
Let's take like murdering somebody, right? Murdering someone for no reason at all, or just for bad reasons, like you want to steal their wallet or something. Doing that causes them harm, right? It inflicts harm and it takes away from their well-being. Instead, if you lend them $1 or pat them on the back or give them a compliment, you are not harming them, and you are improving their well-being. So and it's not.
Do you
exist my opinion
to improve others' well-being?
Well, it's not just my subjective opinion that the consequences of my actions will lead to this or that.
Yeah,
right? That's a fact of the world.
I know.
And I can appeal to that fact
but I want to
as an
ask
objective
you this.
reason. So my first point is
Why
that
is
I
others'
do.
well-being your concern?
I do because that's what's the good thing. That's the good thing to do.
Okay, why is a good thing to do your concern?
Now we have reached philosophical bedrock. We've reached the bottom of our ethical philosophy here when I say something like well-being is good and harm is bad, right? I take these as just like basic value assumptions that then I build the whole moral philosophy on top. The thing is, though, Vocab's entire argument is based on a double standard, because I can ask him, okay, what is his standard? Well, he's going to say that it's God. And I can say, well, why is God good, right? What is your non-circular justification for why God's good? You're just going to say, well, he's intrinsically good. It is what it is. It's this brute fact.
Well, when we're talking about ultimate authorities, it has to stop there. Otherwise, there's something else that's the ultimate authority. I can't say God is good because I decided
and
he's
I
good,
have my
and
ultimate
I'm the
stopping
authority.
That's what I'm saying. We both have
but
our
here's the thing,
ultimate stopping points.
Is yours even potentially bedrock in the way you want it to be? Because what I'm saying is you don't have to even agree with the idea of this triune God, but it seems like you recognize, well, that's even though I don't agree, that's potentially a real stopping place. I don't see how your just thing that you put under there.
I think it's a much more realistic stopping point.
Because you don't have God in your system. Of
No,
course it is. You don't have another option, though.
No. If we're talking about morality, we're talking about human behavior and the relations that humans have with each other and the consequences of our actions on other people. Right? That's what morality is about.
Even that.
Why not have a standard of morality be the people that you're talking about, the people who are either harmed or helped by your actions? That's the standard. The facts of who we are determine what the moral facts are. Right? If we were different, then the moral facts would be different. But there are still facts. Just like I can use an analogy with health or with like nutrition. Right? What is a good meal and what is a bad meal? When a doctor says you should stop eating so much fast food because you have high blood pressure and liver failure or something because you eat too much McDonald's, like that movie Super Size Me, right? The guy eats McDonald's every day for 30 days, and at the end he's got liver failure and high cholesterol and high blood pressure. The doctor's going to tell him you shouldn't do that. Well, that value itself is dependent upon the objective facts of his digestive system and the saturated fat in those burgers, right? There's this relation between the two, and from that relation, you get this value that one meal is good, one meal is bad, and you should do one and you shouldn't do the other. And so there's a coherent system of values and obligations about human nutrition, and no one's going to say you have to have a God exist for there to be good and bad food. The same is true with morality. Go ahead.
So Sam Harris is a pretty well-known atheist. He has a book called The Moral Landscape where he says we can basically use scientific means or methods to determine a rough shape or outline of human morality. And that's what he's engaged in, interested in. I'm not saying you're copying, I'm just saying that's an interesting way to go. That's a project he's developing. Some of what I hear you saying is kind of like that. And sometimes what I see happening in this is the word health, almost like physical health, gets replaced with what's moral. And you kind of just did that, but there's not necessarily an equation of what is healthy equals moral, because we all understand like something healthy, it helps the system do this or that, but that doesn't actually equal what's morally good. And let me show you a couple things of what I mean by that. Number one is, what if I don't define good meal as what's healthy? What if I define good meal as I enjoy it? Now, I define good meal differently than you. So when you're saying McDonald's is a bad meal, I'm like, no, it's a good meal, because my definition of good is different than yours. So everything we're talking about hinges on how you define good. What I'm saying is you don't have a way to clearly, truly define good. And I know you don't like God being the answer, but it seems like you'd still recognize, yeah, it's a tendentious way to do it. Secondly, relation to that, let's take it out to the societal level. So out here, we're going to talk about health, good and bad. Let's view a nation state and its borders as an organism of sorts. You know, people are functioning and moving and doing things within each other. And let's think about what would be best to keep it healthy. Well, I'm not saying you're saying this, so everyone please understand. I'm not saying an atheist says this. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just telling you what one person said in response to that, or what actually people have said in response to that, that shows you it gets kind of real dicey about, well, healthy versus morality. There's people who have said, dictators and various world leaders, I can give you names if you like, that if you're a member of society and you have enough physical limitations, say you're physically handicapped, mentally handicapped, or you become that way, or say it's old age, you then leave the class of producers who are helping the well-being of the society by working and earning and all that, and you enter a new class of useless eaters. So you're no longer contributing anything because you yourself are dependent upon others, and then at that point you only consume. So people need to care for you, you need this, maybe the state is involved, and so all of a sudden resources are dedicated to you, but because of your state, you can't offer no real resource. It may be permanent, it might be temporarily. There's been lots of societies and cultures that through various ways, they've used different means. The ancient Romans, when they viewed a human that was defective, would oftentimes, if the father felt like it, and he thought it was a wise decision, it was considered a moral thing to do this. So it sounds weird to us. He would do what's called exposure, leave the baby like on a hilltop where they would quickly die, or they had like basically kind of baby dumps where they would just die together. And it wasn't considered immoral. It was considered the father's right, rational choice, and actually for the betterment of society. And he would not take on the child. You know, they were born with an arm, all kinds of things. And places still do this. When you're saying this stuff, I'm trying to say, applying your morality to this larger societal situation, what makes you say, oh yeah, take care of the useless eaters? On an evolutionary worldview, which you do have, I'm not saying you personally, if you had to vote for a politician, I don't believe you would let them starve for a second. I don't think that about you. That's never what I'm saying. And I think you know that. I just want to reiterate. I'm not saying that about Spencer. He bought my coffee today. He's a nice guy. I'm saying what the resources are he has to pull from for his worldview. And I'm not saying he couldn't make a convincing case because he's a convincing guy. But is it really there? Does he really have a way to say, save the useless eaters, save the useless eaters? I'm saying I don't really think you have a way to say, I'm just speaking facts is all I'm saying. And by the way, I didn't coin useless eaters. I'm sure you know dictators have used that phrase. It's a real phrase they use in different languages. How do you justify keeping them around upon your understanding of health and what's best and all that for everybody? Especially, let's say they're suffering, you know?
Yeah, well, so what you're bringing up is kind of like an extreme case where, morality isn't an easy thing, and no one ever said it was easy. And maybe there isn't like I'm trying to actually imagine the scenario with this country with these people who, it would be a humanitarian crisis for sure. But the fact that you can pull up this extreme case, it doesn't mean that there can't be sensible moral judgments made if God doesn't exist. It just doesn't follow. So we've had discussions about this before, and you've done this before, where you bring up an exception to the rule.
I don't agree this is
and
an
then you
exception.
generalize from that.
I hear what you're saying, but I don't agree this is an exception.
It's almost like uncharitable. I could do the same if theistic morality is true. I can say, well, what if a person or a whole society doesn't care about pleasing God? They don't care about the standard of God as morality, and they don't care about going to hell, and they don't care about any of that. What moral reason should they have to be good? Right? It's like they have to take certain things on board first to then follow the moral facts. It's like that's the nature of any ethical system. So you're criticizing me for something that you can't even yourself make fit. So I can't appeal to these resources, like he was saying, about reasons to do things. And I think if there just is a reason in the world, like performing some action is going to harm someone, that's a reason not to do it.
But why?
Because I have the other people's interests in mind. I'm empathetic.
Why?
I have the ability to empathize with others.
Do you think it's an evolutionary advantage to be empathetic?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think there's times where it can harm your health and well-being to be empathetic towards others on a strictly evolutionary reading of reality?
There are instances where someone can be so empathetic that they lose their life. Yes,
So
but
is it
on the
possible
whole,
that
natural
empathy
selection
might be an evolutionary defect?
No. Natural selection definitely has reasons, kind of like anthropomorphizing.
That was a weird
here.
statement, bro.
I know. It's just a way of speaking about biology that there are natural selection can select for empathetic groups of people who, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and you have reciprocal altruism within populations. Those populations are going to be more successful. They're going to be more successful at finding food, at defending predators, right? They can work together as groups. Cooperation has helped humanity become what we are. I mean, if it wasn't for group cooperation and language and understanding and us getting along to a certain level within our groups, we wouldn't have gotten this far to build universities and make civilization, right? So it's based on people having a set of societal norms.
Oh, another person agreeing with you, asking why over and over is not making a case. Everyone's on your side, bro. I'm just periscope comments. That's obviously directed against me. You like that?
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Spencer says thanks.
So, I mean, I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry, man.
Does anyone have any questions or any of this making sense, or both of us are talking nonsense?
I think they're tracking.
The fact that, Spencer, you actually, to me, true atheism is you don't believe in anything. There's no spiritual life to anything, whether it's the God,
Why is that?
capital G. Because I do have actually some very good friends who are atheists. We have our little discussions, and I just give them my own life experience, like I was talking to Dr. Bird earlier, that I don't care to argue. I just tell them what I've experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them, she says, because of what you've experienced, and I know you're my close personal friend, she says, I understand more agnostic. And I don't really see you as a true atheist because you say that if you had your own supernatural experience, it might convince you otherwise, as to where, to me, a true atheist, they're not even going to believe that a supernatural experience would take place. So I think, in my opinion, because I've got to go back to my office in a few minutes, that truly you're not a full-blown atheist like you might believe, because you have that inkling of doubt, or say, well, you know what, there's chance, para-chance. If that happened to me, it might convince me to believe that in a God of some type. And you said that yourself, that if you had your own supernatural experience, that you would definitely. We've had too many for me not to believe in my own family, my own experience with friends. I've seen people walk out of a service where they had rotten teeth and they walked out with gold-filled teeth, and these were my personal friends, and that was like one of the most incredible miracles that I've ever experienced. And to me, it was God, because I do go by the Bible, and it says when you're gathered there, God dwells in the praises of His people, and that's exactly what we're doing. So I mean, there's miracles upon miracles, which is not just my own reasoning alone. That's happened after we found God. But to me, it's because you said it yourself that if you were to have your own supernatural experience, I mean, you're not closed to it. So to me, a true atheist they're not going to believe that a supernatural experience could even take place in their life.
Well, if atheism just means the belief that a God doesn't exist, it doesn't mean you have to be dogmatic about it. You don't have to be certain that a God doesn't exist. Just like a person can be a theist, they can believe in God, but have doubts sometimes, right? Like I've heard Vocab say in a recent interview that, every Christian has doubts sometimes, every believer, right? So you don't, it doesn't suddenly make you an agnostic if you have a doubt if you're a Christian, right? So you can be a theist and have doubts, you can be an atheist and have doubts. So it doesn't take certainty to be either one. And I think it's good to be open to having your mind changed, or at least think about what it would take to change your mind. And that's all I'm saying is that, I am convinced at this point that there isn't a God, but I'm open to there being one, and that doesn't make me not an atheist.
Okay.
I wish I did have the same experiences that you had, just to see what they're like. I'm actually interested to know what that first-hand encounter is like. What it feels like. I can't say I've ever had one. So.
Do you believe in that evil exists, or that have you ever felt evil presence before?
Well, I think I see evil in a different way than you would.
No, my question is, let me rephrase it. Have you ever felt like you walked into some place and you're like, dude, oh no, we need to get out of here. There's just
Sure. But
just
Is it when you're around evangelical Christians? Is that
I'm walking to church and I'm like, God, get out of here. No.
But it's so easy for people to grasp that sense right away, like something is not right here. No. Let's get out of here.
Right.
It's so easy for people to actually feel that and grasp that and want to react to it, rather than to feel and to sense and to acknowledge that there could be God's presence. And
God's presence when there's evil there?
no, if you've been in a place where God's presence is, where you feel His Spirit, it's like most people don't know how to wrap their brain around. They feel something, they don't know what it is, but there's some people who don't want to accept that that's God that they feel. But if they walk into an eerie situation, into a house party that's something, or anywhere, a club, or you're walking down an alley and you feel that, there's so much easier to grasp that evil is there. Like, there is just something not right with this place. Do you feel that? I just want to get out of here. There's so much easy. They just want to, they're more apt to react to that than they are to say, no, that wasn't God. That was just good feelings. That was just a happy place that everybody was at. You get what I'm saying? And that's one of the things that I've talked to people about, because it's like crazy. It's like, well, how do you really believe and say, well, it was really evil. Something wasn't right there. I had to leave. But if it's a happy place, or someone's like, oh my gosh, I feel God's presence. Dude, get out of here. Everybody's just happy around here. Give me a break. It's kind of crazy. That's being double-minded when it comes to some people, where they're going to grasp that they feel evil and they know something there is not right, as opposed to when they walk into some place and they go, oh no, everybody's just happy here. No, that's God's presence. When, depending on where you are, of course, if you go into the bar, you can have a lot of happy feelings, but talking about if you go someplace and it's...
Do you even drink?
No.
I feel like I've known you. Yeah. He's not going to be happy in the bar. He's going to be happy in the library.
The library.
Yeah, that's where he feels happy feeling.
Well, I've had prayer meetings in the library, so I felt God in the library too. So.
Well, you know what's interesting, Lori, so what you're saying, so I got to do this from time to time. Probably no one's seen it, so it's just going to... Did anyone watch Netflix Season 1 Daredevil?
Yeah.
Yes. All right, now that's step one. Step two, do you remember, in Daredevil, the Marvel comic hero, he always has these wrestlings with sort of his Roman Catholic background. That's sort of part of his character, and it's interesting because he's the devil of Hell's Kitchen. But there's a part in there where he's speaking, because he has all these feelings of guilt and shame about kind of what he's doing in different ways and the methods he has to use, and he's talking to like a Roman Catholic priests that he visits a lot. And they're like at this bench in this one scene in the show, and the Roman Catholic priest, and they're having this discussion about, actually it's very similar in some ways to what we're talking about right now. Like the moral things, and then actually the idea of is there a naked, raw evil in the world? And they're going back and forth, and the Catholic priest talks about, I went to seminary, and, basically he kind of relates, I became like sort of an intellectual egghead, like, I was just sort of studying theology in seminary. Seminary is like, could be like training in higher theological education. And in there, we were taught it wasn't really like theologically or academically respectable, even as Roman Catholics, to any longer believe in a personal devil. That was like an outdated idea that you really shouldn't hold to. It's kind of like superstitious and all this. And then the Daredevil character starts to interrupt the Catholic priest because he thinks that's where he's ending the story. That's like his answer. Like, well, I kind of lost my faith in the devil at seminary, which is ironic. And he says, no, I'm not finished. Hold on. And then he goes on and says, basically, then when I started doing, and I'm not Roman Catholic, so that's not the point of the story. I'm an evangelical Christian, but the point is like this discussion of evil. then he goes on and says, but then I sort of got out into the world after seminary and saw and experienced things firsthand that they were so wicked, so evil, that it's sort of what led him back to a basic belief and know there's a real personal devil, for lack of a better word, and a real sense of evil. It's a fascinating conversation. It's written better than I can describe it because it's Hollywood writers. But I loved watching it because you don't get a lot of that in-depth kind of philosophical moral talk a lot of times in TV and movies and all that. But man, it was a great conversation. And what he's saying is similar to what you basically said just there, is there's a sense you can have of such a strong moral evil that it's almost like leaps beyond the bounds of merely this is just messed up people. It like goes to another place. Now, I'm not saying it's a definitive argument for God's existence. Obviously, it's kind of a different thing. But it's sort of, it's not necessarily something I would have brought up, but I think it's interesting that she said it. So I wanted to bring that to bear because I do think, it's like, when people experience Auschwitz, Jewish concentration camp during World War II, some people left like, where's the God of Abraham? He's not here. Forget about it. There is no God. Look what we just experienced. Other people left with an unshakable foundational belief in God, and part of it, as you read some of the survivors' writings, was because they saw an evil they couldn't explain any other way other than basically the sort of a theistic biblical narrative. Now again, it's sort of an artsy, different type of apologetic, but I think it's still good food for thought.
I kind of agree. I mean, some people will interpret events one way, other people interpret it another way. I just think that there are good psychological reasons for why someone would attribute some evil event to some spirit with some evil intention, right? It's kind of like projecting our own psychology onto the world, right? It's a way of
over-interpretation.
Right. It's like a way of
seeing a pattern where there is none, type of thing, all that.
Anthropomorphizing intentionality into the world, yeah. And I mean, it's like you can explain all the horrible stuff that happens just in terms of the actions of some people and the harm that it causes on others, right? You can explain it all in those terms. If you want to read into it a bunch of supernatural battles that are going on between good and evil, I mean, you can do that, but that seems unnecessary.
If it works for you, let's go ahead, just don't hurt anybody, right?
Sure. I mean, right. I mean, can you see it from my point of view?
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, yes. Yeah.
So what makes you want to go a step beyond and to say that there is this person that is a spirit in the ether named Satan floating around, messing with certain people and why would you want to appeal to something so magical and so
I don't know about that.
unreasonable?
I don't know if that is magical per
kind of
se.
a loaded question. But why the need to go beyond all this supernatural religious stuff?
Supernatural religious. What happened to your precision of language, bro? Magical, supernatural religion stuff. No, but I'll give you the base reason. Instead, I won't give you a fancy version because I believe in the Bible. That's the base reason. So, here's what happens. We have these things in our life that we view as legitimate inputs, meaning they're providing us with knowledge and information. Mm-hmm. And then as we take them on, they become part of the way we look out at things. And then when an event happens, it's whatever we have at that time, we interpret the event in that way. And so because Scripture provides us data, so you don't view it as a legitimate. Well, you would view some of it as a legitimate input, what would comport with human reason, et cetera, et cetera. But like I'm viewing it in a different way, obviously. So in taking the data and then experiencing things that match that, it's a filter by which way to understand the reality of it. So that would be the base reason. But like for a Christian that believes in Scripture, regardless of if they had some kind of experience or not, they should still have that as part of their worldview. I'll give you an example, and this is kind of like just I don't know, I find it intriguing. Within Christians, there's different types of Christians, even evangelicals, hopefully you guys know. There's like sort of traditional, maybe straight-laced, like these are stereotypes, what I'm going to do. But like a Baptist who is very like, we don't do any of that demon, no tongue-talking stuff, like just, there's that type of view. And then there's a charismatic who's like rolling on the ground and hooping and hollering, and right? And there's like almost a joke among Christians that when Baptists go do missions work, meaning they leave the United States of America and they go sometimes to different foreign countries and they do the Baptists turn into charismatics because all of a sudden they feel as if they're experiencing supernatural, spiritual warfare in real time, something that they never experienced before. It's a different experience when they see and experience certain things that weren't really present in the States for whatever reason. It changes their outlook. Now, I'm sort of making a joke about some of it. Hopefully you can give a charitable interpretation to sort of the joke version. But the real version is they experience in something that they had not experienced prior, and it changes their sort of some of their theological understanding about the world. And they have a scriptural lens by which to do it. But because the Bible doesn't teach that, for lack of a better word, Satan, for example, that's what we're talking about kind of now, equally works the same way in all places and all times. For example, he's more actively resisting Jesus than he is other times, for example. Even with God, if you look at the Bible, miracles are not always happening. There's like a ton of prophets you could be like, this guy didn't do a miracle, this guy didn't do a miracle. It's these spurts. Like, you see miracles in the lives of Daniel, Isaiah, and then you see a lot of prophets where there's Amos, there's no, unless you would just count sort of the aspect of prophecy, but there's no miracle. There's nothing that you might just say in the miraculous aspect of it. Because Scripture is not really filled with just like nonstop miracle. Like if you read, for example, the book of Ruth, it's just a story about a widow who gets remarried in a sense. It's very plain. Esther, a queen who is put in the right place to help save her people from genocide. God's not even mentioned in the book of Esther. Like the actual word Yahweh is not even in there. But the point is that God working in behind the scenes everyday lives as well, not just some of the fantastic things, but I forgot kind of what I was saying. I was just trying to give a perspective on evil since she brought it up, I guess.
You guys just kind of get the idea of what he's saying is that he kind of views the world through a lens, like a set of Christian, Bible glasses, and everything he
got my Bible glasses, they're right.
Everything he experiences, he sees it through that interpretation, and that's, I guess, why he imposes or sees these evil something over and above just harm caused to other people.
You want to try these? See if it works for you.
Yeah, let me see.
If you notice it.
But I mean, what if you're a Mormon and you put on your Mormon glasses and you see everything through the eyes of Joseph Smith, or you're a Muslim and you see everything through the eyes of the Prophet Muhammad? You know what I mean? It's like that in of itself is just to say, well, I have this bias. I have this theistic bias, and that's just the way I see it.
Well, Christians should admit it, though, just like other people should. So I don't deny that I have what you might call bias. But I don't mean bias like, oh, I hate that person, because it means bias in the sense of we interpret the data through prior existing information that we open. But so does an atheist. Actually, so does everybody.
Well, I mean, I agree we have interpretive lenses. We have to interpret everything that we see in the world through some set of, theoretical ideas. But in terms of we're having a debate. In having reasons to say, if God exists, you can have morals. If God doesn't exist, you can't. Or I don't know if that's your argument, but it's just to say, well, I just assume that it's true and put on these Christian glasses, so that's why I see it that way. That's that's stating a psychological fact about your state of mind. Right? That's saying what you do, how you approach the world, but it doesn't really give anyone who's even halfway skeptical a reason to think that it's true.
I don't think I was saying that I don't know about everything. So I was specifically kind of talking about the idea of because you said why. My answer was a response to your question. If you experience this type of evil, why do you need to go to extra step to have supernatural spiritual forces or a personal devil? That's kind of the specific answer to that question. Because how would it, in the beginning of when you talked, you said we don't really have much information. I forget exactly how you said it, but basically we'd be kind of clueless about God or something like that. I can't remember exactly how you said it, but the teaching of Scripture is that God has communicated. That's specifically, yes, through the Bible, through the prophets, but specifically through Jesus. That's the idea of if you want to put it this way, the Christian religion is a revealed religion. Meaning it's not saying that people sat around and thought with little poems out of fortune cookies and said, okay, we got God figured out. The idea is that God spoke to us, ultimately through His Son. And so we can have information if He truly is a communicative God.
Okay, we got 5 minutes left. I just want to get any questions out that haven't been
You didn't
touched
ask?
on.
There's only 4 people, so we gotta ask something. He's pretty friendly. You won't, and me neither. You can see what Periscope says. I got a couple hearts. One person said atheism is hyper-faithism. So you did get one person finally on my side.
Hyper-faithism.
I'm just telling you what they said. And someone else said, oh, he's actually an agnostic.
No, I believe God doesn't exist. That makes me an atheist.
Ooh.
You're going to get the chart sent to you.
Oh, how can we find this Periscope stream if you don't mind?
At Vocab Malone. So just VOCABMALONE, all one word. It's on Periscope, it's on Twitter. I don't have like tons of followers. I'm still figuring out like what's a practical way to use like little social media technology to just have better conversations or more interactive and engaged, and so that's one way to do it. So, hey, here you have someone's from Sweden. Someone's listening for checking out from Sweden.
Cool.
They're definitely an atheist. Sorry, just kidding. I'm just kidding. Sorry if you're not. Your country needs white nationalism.
Wow.
Oh no, the person saying that to the Swede. I see now. Hyperfaithism is basically an absurd amount of faith to argue against Creator God. So there's a lot going on because someone's from Sweden. Another person says you need white nationalism. Sweden is a Muslim country. So that's you need white nationalism. I don't know how it turned into this, but Periscope's going crazy apparently because I'm not sure how that happened. Eons more faith than Christianity. F off, will you? LOL, LOL faces.
You guys got any questions?
I have a real quick one. Who's Marissa Van Eyck?
Oh, yeah, you like that?
She's a big fan of yours.
Dude, isn't that the best burn ever? Look, did you guys see this? Can I read it?
Yeah, read it.
God maybe, Yahweh no. Also, Vocab Malone is a smarmy, sociopathic piece of ish. And if he got brain cancer, his IQ would go up a notch. Give him hell, Spencer, and send him there if you feel like it.
Dr. Cooper, that a friend of yours on Facebook?
See how the atheists are? See? I'm just kidding. Oh, sorry we left you guys. I don't know what you guys are saying.
I don't think she's an atheist.
No, I know. I don't know what she is. She's just...
Is that your ex-girlfriend or something?
That's a good one. That's a way to present it. No, she's just like this, ubiquitous troll that somehow we all know, but no one really knows much about her. Unless
Troll, sometimes.
she switches these different accounts and just hates. Who else does she hate as much as me? Because it seems like, if you remember back in the day, it's pretty
Calvinist. She's not into Calvinism stuff.
Calvinist Christians. Who else did she hate a lot?
I don't know.
She's got me some pretty sick burns in the past, but that might be the queen of them all.
So do we have any time left? Because I thought of a question.
Germany is bad too, it says.
Okay, so one thing you said is about the benefits of a theistic worldview is that in the end, justice will be done, right? When somebody kills you, I don't know, one of these mass killers.
Yahweh metes out justice.
Okay, right. So, but on the Calvinist view, people are. Do you believe in predestination?
Mm-hmm.
So you believe in the idea that before the creation of the universe, Yahweh, God picked a set of people to be the elect, and then a set of people to be the reprobate. The reprobate are going to hell, not wholly apart from anything they do, any choice they make. It's not about their free will choice. God just picked it that way, and they're just created to end up in hell. And then the elect end up getting saved, and once you're picked by God, that's it. There's no, it's unconditional, right? It's doctrine of unconditional election. Once you're picked, you're picked. It's not part of your choice. It's like the analogy of God reaching into the well. Everyone in the well doesn't want God's help, and he's pulling people out against their will. Those are the left, right? So if the idea is that there's going to be people created to live and go to hell, how can you fit justice into that at all, right? It's not like people are being punished for what they do. People are elected for things they don't do. The whole point is that it's not a works-based salvation, right? It's not based on what you do, and you're appealing to a worldview where you have an eternity of conscious torment for people independent from what they do. That seems like the most unjust view you could possibly have.
Now, justice is meted out according to the works they do. The Bible talks about you're judged according to your works in the flesh. That there be no idle words that'll go left unjudged, that God sees the intents of the heart, that means what you think. So it's not like, oh man, you were this awesome person and God just didn't like you. The idea is that he chooses to show mercy on some, the elect that you speak of, and he chooses to show justice on others. That means the mercy is not present.
All right, fine.
It's strictly the justice.
We'll take it at that. Still, you have an eternal punishment for a finite crime. So let's say there were some people. Maybe let's say I'm destined to go to hell because I sin. I do this and that. I sin in various ways for 70 years. Is it just to say that I deserve an eternal punishment for, say, doing 10,000 things wrong? Maybe I should do 1 day in hell for every one thing I do wrong. But what he's saying is it's actually perfectly just to send people to hell for an eternity.
Do you think
ever and ever and ever? Think about how long that is. It's never ending.
If hell was real, do you think people would stop doing sinful things when in hell?
That's beside the point. It's
not really, because you were saying
you're saying I have this view that can be compatible with justice. Except part of my view is that people are going to go to hell for eternity for finite crimes.
The idea of the finite, I'm not agreeing with the assumption about the finite crime aspect, but putting that aside for a second, you're saying hypothetically, couldn't I be punished this long for this amount of a crime, like a system? But the thing is, if a sinner sins in the afterlife equally, there's no thought that they stop ceasing.
But God is the
sin
one
against God, even in the afterlife.
God is the one who created hell in the first place.
Yes.
God is the one who created the world, who is omniscient, who knew everything that would happen in the first place.
Yes.
So it doesn't really help you to say that once people go to hell, they'll keep on sinning.
I'm just answering your one question, though.
Well, it's the question of how you can square justice, or how you can call that a just system, is beyond me.
Okay, so why is it God unjust to punish sin? Why is it? Why? On a Christian,
like I said, maybe if Hitler killed 6 million people, have him sit in hell for 6 million years or 6 billion years, but not for an eternity, right? Let's say I stole a candy bar.
So then what's it get to do?
I get the same punishment as Hitler.
Well, if that's so, is there anyone who exists who all they did was steal a candy bar?
That's just an extreme. Maybe I did 1,000 other things that were these small sins or whatever. But I didn't kill anybody. I'm still just like the average human being, like my grandmother or something. She wasn't a Christian, but does she deserve to be, go to hell for an eternity for whatever kinds of theological sins she committed? It seems unjust to do that.
So you think the idea of hell?
It seems absurd.
Sorry. Can we get some? We can wrap it up.
Yeah, sorry.
So some finishing statements, I guess.
Sure. Finish with hell. I'm glad you guys asked some questions, and it's been cool to be here today. And Spencer's a good thinking atheist, so he has a lot of good things to say, and I'm always glad when Dr. Cooper helps us out, loves being here, and I think he did a good job too. And I don't know the state or position of each person in here, but I would put forth that there is an experiential aspect to Christianity, meaning if it is true Jesus rose from the dead, which I believe that it is a historical fact, that's what I mean by that, then he is alive, and as someone who is not mere man, yes man, but the God-man, so unique among anyone who has lived or entered in creation, not merely what the Muslims will call a rasul, not a mere rasul, meaning not just a prophet, something more. And the description of him in Scripture is that he's even present with those who are his, meaning as a disciple, as a follower of Christ, there's a certain sense in which he metaphorically, metaphysically, and in a certain understanding, literally walks with you, meaning you experience life with Jesus. All I can say is there's a lot of good things, and I think we should always be intellectual and try to discuss things, but there's a certain realness to experiencing that no argument or presentation will sort of give you, and that's why a 15-year-old kid who has a legitimate relationship with Jesus can have good reasons for what they believe, but they may not be able to dip into philosophy and intelligent design or anything like that, but they have a legitimate sort of waking, breathing, living experience with the risen Christ. And that's what I would just point people towards. Again, I know that's not the intellectual, satisfactory opening statement, But I think it's just as valued, and I'd like to put that out there as I close.
Cool. And I'll just say, I encourage you guys to challenge your beliefs and to look into what other people think, and to be open-minded about other ideas that are foreign to your own.
Yes.
And as they say, iron sharpens iron, right? So
Yeah.
it's like it's good to have intellectual diversity and to challenge your own beliefs, and it's good to grow and to revise your beliefs in light of new evidence. And I've changed my mind on things throughout the years, and I think last time I've talked to Vocab, he's changed his views slightly. Yeah. So Vocab 2.0 that we're looking at now, it's good. And I know Dr. Cooper has probably changed views in his past. So it means we're learning. It means we're changing. We're adapting. We're looking at new things in new ways, and I think that's a good thing. So I'm glad you guys can make it out, and I just encourage you to keep
the faith. He's going to say keep the faith.
Keep the faith. Keep looking, keep researching, keep thinking, and, debates are good. So, thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you guys for coming out. If you'd like to join our club, talk to Matt and me afterwards.
That's the main thing on here.
Yeah, you can follow us on things on Facebook.
Yes.
Who are these followers of yours?
No, I don't. Anyone publicly can jump on, so they're not like people I know. Yeah, the whole conversation is turning into that.
Thanks.
God bless y'all. That's like multiple people now. That's like.
So you attach your battery to that?
Well, so I charged my battery earlier because I knew I was going to do this, and it goes.
Or you can just leave it on there, right? As it's going.
Yeah. So like.
I'm gonna buy one of these little stand.
So yeah, this is just like a little kit you can get. A little tripod deal. So 7 people are watching, and then you see when new people join. And if they like what we're talking about, they hearts. What does an atheist believe in? No one hates you. And so when people start to get really big, like this is like really kind of like nothing.
Yeah.
Like by just continually doing it and getting people who pay attention when they go on, and then you can connect it to your own social media. So you can connect. Periscope is ran by Twitter. So every time you go live, you can announce it to Twitter, but you can also set up where it announces it on Facebook. And then Periscope makes it now where you can save the videos. They used to disappear after 24 hours. Now the video can stay up, so you can even give someone a link, like watch this little Periscope thing we did.
And then could you download it potentially?
Yeah, you can make it downloadable to your like the device you record it with.
Yeah.
So like I could make it downloadable on here. I don't know if you can download it after the fact. I'm sure there's a way to do it, but I don't know. But I know you can replay it. And the advantage is like, you get like, so you get these little things like,
That's all right.
So 103 total views. So I broadcast our location. So there we are. So then it even tells you like the conversation, like how it went.
Yeah.
And then it shows you some of the viewers. So it's just a kind of a way to interact with people. And so follow, share. You can do other little things. So it's pretty. There's other things like this, like Facebook Live. If I went Facebook Live, I'd probably get more people to do it because Facebook. But I don't like Facebook. I don't like Facebook Live as much. I don't use it as much, and so it's kind of cool. It's one little other way to connect with a few more people.
Colored striped shirt, sir. Are you an atheist?
Who's colored striped shirt? Are you colored striped shirt? I think I mean you. They're asking Dr. Cooper if he's an atheist. Someone says they want to know on here, what does an atheist believe? I got like that 3 times.
What is an atheist?
I think they legitimately don't know. I don't know if you want to. Someone asked like 3 different times, what does an atheist believe?
It's someone who believes that God doesn't exist. It's not that hard, people. I mean, I guess some people.
I think they're legitimately asking. There's a lot of uninformed.
They'll say it's just a lack of belief in God. Yeah, but
what is your take on that spectrum?
That's a small belief. Huh?
Yeah, it is.
On what?
Atheism is just one thing.
Gnostic, atheist, theist.
I don't know. I think he's better at that than I am. I don't really get too much into that.
That doesn't help because when you're talking. So let's say we define atheism as just the lack of belief. It's not a positive belief. You just lack a belief, right? It's a kind of a. It's like having, a box with nothing in it, right? And then say that you are a Gnostic atheist. It's like So then what you're saying is you know that you lack a belief. It has nothing to do with God at all. So people end up equivocating. They'll say that atheism is defined as just the lack of belief and nothing more. But then they'll call themselves an agnostic atheist or a Gnostic atheist, which assumes that it's about a belief about the world, right? So if you say atheism is just a lack of belief, well then if you're a Gnostic atheist, then you know you lack a belief. And if you're an agnostic
Faith
atheist,
hillbilly
you
idiot
don't know
American.
that you lack a belief. It's like it doesn't make any sense at all. And then another thing is people that will define Gnosticism as like certainty, and they'll define agnosticism as like anything less than certainty, or right, like if they'll say, "Oh, I'm an agnostic atheist because I'm not certain that God doesn't exist."
And they assume knowledge equals certainty.
Right, and then when it doesn't at all, like it's you can have knowledge if you're 65% sure or something. So that whole chart doesn't help at all. It just confuses.
Not only that, but I don't know if this makes sense to practical experience. Like, people they have this scale, and sometimes Christians will be like, "Oh, you're not an atheist, you're an agnostic," and it's like they kind of like it, or it's exciting, or I don't know, or they're like, "Oh, I got him to admit he's an agnostic." But like practically speaking, when I say someone who converts, meaning they did identify one way and now they identify as a Christian, I've never like seen it as like they just went on a scale. Like it could be like a radical like person who's like, I am certain about no God, and they could be over here. I don't know. The scale doesn't seem that relevant almost, in my opinion.
Right, yeah,
that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? Like,
no.
You could just stay on this, I'll call myself an agnostic atheist forever, but doesn't mean you're closer really to anything else.
Right. I mean, people can be talked down in their level of conviction about a belief.
Everything's about Islam, dude.
That may be relevant, like the level of conviction that you have about your propositional attitude toward saying that God exists or God doesn't exist. That can change, and that might be relevant to a debate. But it doesn't. People confuse what it is to believe something, or at least atheists do. It's like they don't. It's like they're stuck in this like Aristotelian idea of you can. It just doesn't make any sense to me. If someone presents the proposition, "Oh, there's this God that exists, the biblical God, it has these traits and these properties, and these Christians over here say that God exists." As soon as you hear that, you think about it in your head, and you're like, you form a kind of you form an attitude toward that proposition, and you're either. I mean, it's pretty hard to be like on the fence. You're either leaning one way or the other, and if you go as far as to like be a keyboard warrior and be debating people online that God doesn't exist, you believe that God doesn't exist, right? It's silly to say that you just lack a belief.
No.
So they're confusing belief, they're confusing knowledge.
He's always correcting atheists and like making them like be more epistemologically aware, and he's about to present the humanist society. He told me what he was going to do, which is like defining atheists, and I was like, dude, they're going to be arguing with you all day over there.
Oh, you're doing that soon?
It'll be in January.
Oh yeah, I'm going to go to it.
They're not going to be ready for him though.
No.
Well, I convinced Andre. Andre used to be one of those lack theist
Yeah,
guys.
that's what he said.
When I got him to shift.
Because then you eliminate the agnostic position altogether, too.
Yeah.
Like, I would say I don't believe either way. I'm undecided.
Mm-hmm.
But with the way they're defining agnostic, that's not an option.
Yeah, they want to do. Yeah, right. They want to just do away with.
People call me an
agnostic
atheist,
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't seem like the right view.
You're a non-theist, but you're also a non-atheist.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
You're fencing.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's an actual mental state that you can have with respect to the
And
propositions.
I'm actually a fence sitter in a lot of the big questions.
You
I
used to
don't
call
think
yourself a
you know.
relativist. Do you still do that or no?
I would consider myself an epistemic relativist in some ways. Like, I don't think logic is relative.
I gotcha.
But when you, like some of the questions you were asking, like how do you evaluate the strength of evidence? I mean, I know Bayes people are trying to look at
Bayes
this,
people?
Right.
I just
Bayes and his people. Yeah, I've seen that. That's wild. Richard Carrier does that. It's really so. Swinburne does that with theism.
With the resurrection.
He tries. Yeah, he does it. So the book I gave him, does God exist? But the resurrection too.
Yeah.
But he's all about that Bayesian like. He's interesting, but like Calvinists is generally not going to really like Richard Swinburne. They'll respect him as a.
He's an evidentialist.
Well, just also the heavy Bayes is like, you can be an evidentialist, but like, how do you argue? I'm not saying I don't respect them. I mean, these people you respect, they're very interesting to read, but it's like, you wouldn't feel comfortable arguing that way, maybe. Like I'm saying I wouldn't feel comfortable arguing how he argues, but it's interesting to read. Like Timothy McGrew, you know him?
Yes.
Like he does that a lot. I wouldn't argue that way, but I found him very intriguing to listen to.
Yeah.
He's very interesting to me, but
He's a smart dude.
yeah, it's like very, and I've heard he's pretty cool. Like I know a lot of people that talk to him.
Him and his wife too.
Yeah, his wife. That's weird.
A stay-at-home mom.
I've heard a couple of debates where they're just wrecking.
Yeah, dude, I heard a couple. I'm like, whoa.
Like it's pretty funny.
Because he's pretty precise. So I wouldn't argue that way, but
super
he's
smart into philosophy, and they go up against people. It's like a debate between Timothy McGrew and Peter Boghossian.
Yeah.
And it was just like,
Oh, that was one I heard. That was killer.
The Unbelievable
Yeah.
podcast.
But see, that can kind of, it's like that could happen to anyone. You could have a Christian who goes up against a really formal and it looks bad. Sometimes
it's ruthless, dude. Like, this guy was trying to ask something about testimony, and he's like, what if there were like 500 people? And she's like, oh, that's cute. You don't think I see what you're doing? And he got super nervous. I was like...
That's funny. All right, yo, well, we can do it. What time we got? All right, signing off. So there's 4 people left, and the last comment was still about Sweden and being overrun by Muslims.
Wow.
This is not what happens why is Sweden so irrelevant when you guys had such a head start? America stole a lot of land. So, yes, you get dumb stuff, but it's not always like that. But it's just social media in general.
For people to view it later?
Yeah, the video, but you can't see the comments like all together. They pop up as you would rewatch it. So, like, if you wanted to see, what are the comments?
Right, like SoundCloud or something.
You would have to, like, watch the thing. I came here for the atheist.
The video will be there, though.
Yeah, and the comments will appear as you watch it, but you can't, like, look, let me just read the comments like on Facebook.
You're wanting to go live on social media with your urban ministry, maybe?
Mildly. I don't know, it feels... I have like all these mixed feelings. Like it feels on one way cheap and exploitative, but it's also you need to do it. It's not like you're making money. I don't know. And also, how do you? I'm not. I don't know. I'm being bullied. All right, guys, I'm gonna go.